My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am the founder and sole proprietor of Artisan Events, a high-end catering and event planning company I built from nothing over 30 years. By any measure, I am a success. My days are filled with client consultations, menu tastings, and the complex logistics of creating perfect moments for other people. I orchestrate joy for a living. I am 55 years old, and to my own daughter, I am little more than a walking wallet, a convenient service to be used and discarded. But on the day she called me a beggar, in the middle of the six-figure wedding I had paid for, the service was permanently disconnected. This isn't a story about a single argument, it's the story of a lifetime of transactions being mistaken for a relationship, and the moment the creditor finally came to collect what she was truly owed, her own life. It all began, as these things so often do, with a lie. The lie was that my ex-husband, Mark, and I were a parenting team. In reality, we were a study in contrasts. I was the foundation, the deep, unseen concrete slab holding the entire structure up. I worked 16-hour days in the early years, my hands raw from peeling vegetables, and my mind a whirlwind of invoices and payroll. I was the one who paid the mortgage, the tuition, the orthodontist bills. My love was expressed in solved problems, in a pantry that was always full, and in the quiet hum of a house that ran smoothly even when I wasn't there. Mark, on the other hand, was the glorious facade. He was the weekend dad, the fun dad. He'd swoop in after a long absence, armed with concert tickets and designer jeans, washing away a month of my quiet, consistent provision with a single, dazzling gesture. He taught our daughter, Lily, a very simple and dangerous lesson, that the person who does the tedious work is the staff, and the person who provides the expensive thrills is the hero. I remember one particular Tuesday when Lily was 10. I had been up since 4 a.m. supervising a breakfast event for a major corporation. I was exhausted, smelling faintly of coffee and croissants, when I got a call from the school nurse. Lily had a fever. I dropped everything, rescheduled 3 client meetings, and raced to the school. I spent the rest of the day holding a cool cloth to her forehead, making her soup, and reading her stories. By evening, her fever had broken. The next day, a package arrived. It was a brand new gaming console from Mark, with a note that read, "Sorry you were sick, sweetie. Let's play together online this weekend." Love, Dad. Lily's eyes lit up. She forgot the soup and the stories. She only saw the shiny box. I wasn't her mother, who had nursed her back to health. I was just the backdrop against which the real gift had appeared. This pattern repeated itself endlessly, creating a deep and damaging groove in our family dynamic. My money was for necessities, for stability, for the unglamorous business of living. His money was for fun, for status, for demonstrating affection in the most transactional way possible. By the time Lily was in her 20s, the conditioning was complete. She would call me to discuss her car insurance payment, or a problem with her apartment lease, her tone businesslike, expectant. She would call her father to gush about the trip to Bali he was funding, or the down payment he'd offered for a future condo he'd never actually deliver on. I was the family's chief operating officer, he was the celebrated CEO, who only showed up for the press conferences. When she announced her engagement to Leo, a young man from a family of old money and even older snobbery, I knew what was coming. Lily presented her wedding plans to me not as a request, but as a project proposal. It was a grand, theatrical affair set at a historic vineyard, complete with a string quartet, artisanal ice sculptures, and a guest list that read like a who's who of the local social register. She handed me a binder, complete with swatches and quotes. At the bottom of a preliminary budget sheet was the estimated total, $100,000. "Isn't it going to be perfect, Mom?" she'd asked, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the vision, not with any warmth for the person she was asking to build it. I looked at her, my beautiful, polished daughter, and I saw a stranger. I saw a product of Mark's careless largesse, and my own exhausted indulgence. But a part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, thought that this could be it. This could be the final, grand gesture that would finally break through. If I could give her this perfect day, this fairytale wedding she'd always dreamed of, maybe then she would see me. Maybe then, the provider would finally be seen as a parent. Yes, darling, I said, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. It will be perfect. I'll take care of it. I kept meticulous records, of course. I always did. I opened a new spreadsheet, titled it Lily's Wedding, and made the first entry. It was an investment, I told myself. A final investment in a love I was desperate to believe was real. The months leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in humiliation, served with a smile. My daughter and her future mother-in-law, Beatrice, formed an immediate and terrifying alliance. Beatrice was a woman carved from ice, whose thin lips seemed permanently pursed in disapproval. She treated me not as the mother of the bride, but as the hired help. They would have planning meetings at Beatrice's country club, a place where the air was thick with the scent of old money and quiet judgment. I would be summoned, not invited. Lily would text me, Beatrice and I are at the club. We need to finalize the floral arrangements. Bring your supplier catalogs. I would arrive, my professional binder in hand, and be led to a small table off to the side while they lunched. They would beckon me over, point at a picture in a magazine, and say, "Can you get this?" But for a better price. Obviously my company, Artisan Events, was a well-respected, premium brand. I could have charged them full price, a price Beatrice's friends paid without blinking. Instead, I leveraged every relationship I had, every discount I was owed, every ounce of goodwill I had accumulated over 30 years. I got the A-list photographer for B-list prices. I convinced my wine supplier to provide vintage champagne at a fraction of its market value. The catering, the most expensive single item, was done at cost. I put my own award-winning chefs on the line, my best staff on the floor. I was saving her, and by extension, myself, over $50,000. This was never acknowledged. Any savings I presented were not met with gratitude, but with the quiet assumption that this was simply my duty, my function. The compliments were always directed at Lily's impeccable taste. The praise for the seamless planning was attributed to her organizational skills. I was an invisible engine, humming tirelessly beneath the floorboards of her grand production. There's a particular kind of pain that comes from being erased in plain sight. I saw it in the way Lily would repeat an idea I'd given her a week earlier, and present it to Beatrice as her own. I felt it when they discussed the seating chart and my name was placed at a table in the back, near the kitchens, alongside a handful of distant cousins. "It just makes more sense for the flow, Mom," Lily had said, not meeting my eye. "You'll be so busy anyway." Busy doing what? I was the mother of the bride. My work was supposed to be done. But in her eyes, my role was perpetual. Her father, Mark, was of course seated at the head table. He had contributed a grand total of $5,000, delivered in a crisp envelope with a theatrical flourish at the rehearsal dinner, a gesture that earned him a round of applause and a tearful hug from Lily. He had purchased his seat at the table of honor for 5 cents on the dollar, while my $95,000 contribution bought me a view of the service entrance. The day of the wedding was a blur of activity. I was on site at dawn, managing my team, ensuring every fork was polished, every glass was gleaming. I oversaw the floral installations and triple-checked the timing with the musicians. I wasn't a mother watching her daughter prepare for her wedding. I was a general commanding an army on the eve of battle. I helped Lily into her $10,000 gown, my hands smoothing the delicate lace. For a fleeting second, her eyes met mine in the mirror, and I saw a flicker of something, panic, perhaps, or a sliver of gratitude. "Thanks, Mom," she whispered. It was a crumb, but I starved for it, and I devoured it whole. The ceremony was beautiful. From my seat in the third row, I watched her marry Leo, and I felt a pang of genuine, uncomplicated happiness for her. Maybe this was enough, I thought. Maybe just seeing her happy was the only return on my investment I needed. Then came the reception. The room was breathtaking, a testament to my team's artistry. Everything was perfect. The music, the lighting, the soft murmur of impressed guests. I finally allowed myself to relax. I made my way to my designated table in the back, the Siberia of the celebration. I sat, took a sip of water, and watched the happy couple at the head table, laughing with Beatrice and Mark. They looked like a perfect family. And then it happened. The final straw. A waiter approached the head table and whispered something to Leo, who then whispered to Beatrice. Her face tightened. She leaned over and said something to Lily. Lily's perfect smile vanished, replaced by a mask of irritation. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me. She beckoned me with an impatient flick of her wrist. I stood and walked toward the head table, a knot forming in my stomach. What's wrong? I asked quietly. Beatrice is very upset, Lily said, her voice a low hiss. Her guest specifically requested the 2008 Dom Perignon, and the waiter is saying we've run out. You said you had handled the champagne. I handled it, I said calmly. I procured 6 cases, exactly as you requested. It's an incredibly popular vintage. I told you it might go quickly, Beatrice scoffed. A competent planner would have anticipated this. My blood ran cold. Lily, desperate to placate her new mother-in-law, didn't defend me. She turned on me, her face flush with anger and embarrassment. Well, you need to fix it. Go find some more. Call your supplier. Do something. Stop just sitting around. The public nature of the rebuke was a slap in the face. All my work, my sacrifice, my love, reduced to a logistical failure in front of her new, wealthy family. Lily, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I am not the planner tonight. I am your mother. I am a guest at this wedding. Lily threw her head back and laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. A guest? You're here because I allowed you to be. Every penny spent on this wedding was my gift from you, which means I paid for your seat. You're not a guest. You're just charity. She leaned in, her voice dripping with the venom she had learned from years of watching her father dismiss me. And then she delivered the words that would shatter everything. Now you're just a beggar who needs to leave. Go on, get out. The world didn't stop. The string quartet didn't fall silent in a dramatic screech. But in my personal universe, a tectonic plate shifted, unleashing a cataclysm that had been building for 30 years. The word beggar echoed in the space between us, a stunning, brutal indictment. It hung in the air, shimmering with cruelty. A beggar. Me? The woman who had sacrificed her youth, her sleep, her very essence to build a life for this child. The woman whose name was on the checks that had paid for the very dress on her back and the food on her plate. My mind, usually a chaotic swirl of logistics and planning, became preternaturally calm. The hurt, a familiar, dull ache I had carried for decades, flash froze into something hard and sharp, rage. But it wasn't a hot, screaming rage. It was a cold, crystalline fury, clear and perfect and utterly resolute. I looked at Lily, at her beautiful, contorted face, and I no longer saw my daughter. I saw a stranger I had funded, an ungrateful client who had just breached her contract in the most spectacular way imaginable. I let a small, mirthless smile touch my lips. A beggar, I repeated, my voice soft, but carrying in the sudden lull of conversation at the head table. That's a fascinating choice of words. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet intensity of my fury was more powerful than any shout. I saw a flicker of fear in Lily's eyes. She had pushed me for years, always assuming I would absorb the blow and come back for more. She had never seen me push back. I slowly pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady as I unlocked the screen and opened my financial app, then the spreadsheet I had so meticulously maintained. Let's talk about what kind of beggar I am, shall we? My voice was conversational, as if I were discussing the weather. I turned slightly, addressing not just Lily, but Beatrice, Mark, and the entire head table, whose occupants were now staring at us, forks frozen halfway to their mouths. The venue for this lovely event, the one Beatrice so admires. That was $25,700, paid in full from my business account on April 12. I tilted my phone screen slightly. On-screen text could have displayed the amount in bold, damning numbers. The floral arrangements you were so specific about, Lily. $7,250. The string quartet, flown in from the city. $4,000, plus their hotel rooms. The photographer, whose day rate is typically $8,000. I got him for $5,000, as a personal favor. I continued, my voice a calm, steady metronome of financial facts. With each line item, I could see the color draining from Lily's face. Her fury was being replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. I was systematically dismantling the fantasy she had built for herself and her new family, brick by expensive brick. And the catering, I said, my eyes locking onto Beatrice's. My company, Artisan Events, which you seem to hold in such low regard, would have billed $180 per head for this menu. For 200 guests, that's $36,000. But I only billed for raw material costs and basic labor. $18,400. A gift? From me, I saved the best for last. I turned to my ex-husband, Mark, who was looking deeply uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as if the plush chair had turned to stone. And Mark. Dear, generous Mark. Your contribution was a check for $5,000. A lovely gesture. Which brings the grand total, covered by me, the beggar, to $98,350. The silence was now absolute. The entire table was staring at me. I had stripped away the artifice and laid bare the cold, hard truth of the situation. I was not a guest. I was not the help. I was the sole investor in a $98,000 startup called Lily's Perfect Life, and the CEO had just tried to have me thrown out. With my case made, it was time for the decisive action. I took a deep breath. You are right about one thing, Lily. I should leave. I put my phone back in my purse and looked at my daughter. But a beggar doesn't just leave. A benefactor, when insulted, withdraws their patronage. I took a step back, turned, and made one final call. Not to a champagne supplier, but to my head of operations, a man named David who had been with me for 15 years. He answered on the first ring. David, I said, my voice clear and firm. The Vance Hamilton wedding is over. Issue a code black. Code black was a term we'd created years ago for emergencies, a fire, a medical crisis, a catastrophic failure. It meant an immediate, orderly shutdown. Shut down the bar service immediately. Instruct the kitchen to stop all dessert service. The musician's contract is terminated as of this moment. My staff are to begin breakdown and cleanup. They are all on double overtime, effective now, paid from my personal account. Have them send the final invoice for their hours directly to me. Under no circumstances are they to take instructions from Miss Lily, Mr. Mark, or anyone from the groom's family. Is that clear? Crystal clear, Eleanor, David said, his voice laced with an understanding that went beyond the words. He knew. He had seen the dynamic for years. He was loyal to me, not to the client who happened to be my daughter. I hung up the phone. I looked at Lily's face, now a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. The ramifications were crashing down on her. I gave her a final, level look. Enjoy the rest of your perfect evening, I said. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I walked calmly and deliberately through the beautiful room I had created, past the stunned guests, and out into the cool night air, leaving a wake of chaos and consequences behind me. I didn't look back. The begging was finally over. The moment I stepped outside the grand doors of the Vineyard Manor, the curated sounds of the party, the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, were sliced off as if by a guillotine. The sudden silence was replaced by the chirping of crickets and the frantic, ragged sound of my own breathing. A wave of adrenaline and delayed shock washed over me, and my legs felt weak. I had just detonated a bomb in the center of my own life, and the fallout was still raining down inside that room. But as I leaned against the cold stone wall, a different feeling began to surface, pushing through the shock, a profound, exhilarating sense of freedom. It was the feeling of a prisoner who has finally, after decades of quiet incarceration, kicked down the door of her cell. My phone began to vibrate in my purse, a furious, insistent buzzing. I knew it was Lily. Or Beatrice. Or Mark. I ignored it. Instead, I made a second call, the one I should have made from the beginning. Clara? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Clara has been my best friend for 20 years, my business partner in the early days, and the one person who saw the toxic dynamic with my family for exactly what it was. She was my ally, my validator, the one who had told me for years that I was being abused, not just being a good mother. I'm on my way, she said, no questions asked. She had been on standby, knowing this day could end in triumph or disaster. It had somehow managed to be both. 10 minutes later, her car pulled up. As I got in, the grand doors of the manor flew open. Lily came stumbling out, her $10,000 dress dragging on the gravel driveway. She was a vision of bridal fury. Leo and Beatrice were right behind her, their faces thunderous. Mother, she shrieked, the word a weapon. What have you done? You've ruined everything. I just looked at her from the passenger seat of Clara's car. The staff was already starting to discreetly clear the outdoor terrace. The lights in the main ballroom flickered and then dimmed to a functional, unromantic brightness. The magical illusion was gone, replaced by the stark reality of a party that had come to an abrupt and embarrassing end. Beatrice stepped forward, her voice like shards of glass. I have never, in all my life, witnessed such a vulgar and manipulative display. You are clearly a deeply unwell, jealous woman, jealous. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh this time. Beatrice, I am the woman who signed the check that paid for your son's wedding. The only thing I'm jealous of is your complete and utter lack of self-awareness. It must be Bliss. Leo, who had been silent until now, found his voice. Lily, this is your mother. This is the family you're marrying me into. He looked at her with contempt, and in that moment, I saw the first hairline crack appear in the foundation of their brand new marriage. This wasn't about a lack of champagne. This was about the revelation that his new bride's family fortune, the one she had undoubtedly alluded to, was not a vast, endless resource. It was a tired, overworked woman who had just reached her breaking point. The confrontation was a cacophony of entitlement. Lily screamed about her perfect day being ruined. Beatrice threatened social ostracism. Mark, who had finally shuffled out, tried to play the hapless peacemaker. Now, everyone, let's just calm down. Eleanor, don't be so dramatic. I said, looking at him with 30 years of accumulated resentment. You want to talk about dramatic, Mark? How about we talk about the child support you forgot to pay for 5 years? Or the college fund you cashed out to buy a sports car? You have been coasting on my labor your entire life, painting me as the villain while you play the hero with my money. Your performance is over. The show is closed. I had nothing left to lose, and the truth was a powerful weapon. Clara put the car in drive. You're making a huge mistake. Lily wailed, her voice cracking with desperation, as we began to pull away. I rolled down the window, just for a moment. "No, darling," I said, my voice calm and final. "The mistake was thinking I would be your beggar forever." We drove away, leaving them standing in the gravel driveway amidst the ruins of a $100,000 party. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. My phone buzzed with texts and voicemails for the next 48 hours. They cycled through the stages of grief, angry tirades, tearful manipulations, veiled threats, and finally, pathetic, self-serving apologies. I didn't listen to any of them. I simply blocked their numbers. Lily. Mark. Beatrice. Leo. One by one, I digitally amputated the toxic limbs from my life. The social fallout, as I later learned from my niece Maya, was even more devastating for them. The story of the wedding crash spread like wildfire through their social circle. But the narrative they tried to spin, of a crazy, jealous mother, didn't hold. My reputation in the community was impeccable. I was known as a hard-working, honest business owner. Too many people at that wedding were my clients, people who knew the quality of my work and the integrity of my character. The story quickly morphed into the truth. The entitled daughter and her snobbish in-laws had publicly humiliated the woman who had single-handedly funded their lavish affair. Lily, who had so desperately wanted to ascend into a higher social stratosphere, became a pariah overnight. She was not the princess in the fairy tale, she was the court jester in a tragedy of her own making. The immediate aftermath was a strange, hollow silence. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was a space waiting to be filled. The first few weeks after the wedding were an exercise in reclaiming my own space. I went through my house, a house I had kept largely for Lily's comfort and convenience, and began to see it with new eyes. It was filled with ghosts of obligations, of thankless holidays and one-sided conversations. I saw the guest room, always kept pristine for Lily's infrequent visits, and the dining room table, large enough to host family gatherings, where I always felt like the caterer. I called a real estate agent the next day. Selling the house was the physical manifestation of the internal shift that had occurred. It was a declaration that I was no longer in the business of maintaining a museum of someone else's comfort. I sold it within a month, taking with me only the things that brought me genuine joy, my books, my art, the comfortable armchair where I drank my morning coffee. The rest, the oversized furniture, the formal china, the relics of a life that wasn't truly mine, I left behind. With the proceeds, I bought a smaller, chic condominium downtown, overlooking the city skyline. It was modern, bright, and unapologetically mine. There was no guest room. My friend Clara joked that I had finally built a life with no room for squatters. The silence from my family was deafening, but peaceful. I had blocked their numbers, but I knew from the lack of letters or attempts to contact me at my office that they were stewing in their own self-inflicted misery. The healing process began in earnest. For the first time in my adult life, I had no one to answer to but myself. The profits from my business, which had for so long been siphoned off to fund Lily's lifestyle, were now mine to invest, to save, to spend. I invested heavily in artisan events, hiring new talent and expanding our services. But I also invested in myself. I took a month off, something I hadn't done in 30 years, and went to Italy. I took a cooking class in a small Tuscan village, learning to make pasta from a woman named Sophia, who laughed from her belly and didn't care about profit margins. I spent afternoons reading in sun-drenched piazzas, drinking wine that cost €3 a bottle and tasted better than the finest vintage. I walked until my feet ached and felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was missing. I was building a new family, a chosen family. Clara was at its center, of course. But there were others, my loyal staff at work, the new friends I made in my condo building, the other entrepreneurs I began to mentor, sharing the lessons I had learned not just about business, but about self-worth. It was a quieter life, but it was infinitely richer. About 6 months after the wedding, I received an email. It was from my niece, Maya, the daughter of my sister. Maya had been one of Lily's bridesmaids, a quiet, observant girl who had always been on the periphery. Her email was long and heartfelt. She told me she was ashamed of her silence at the wedding and that she had witnessed the dynamic for years, but had been too scared to speak up. She apologized. Then, she gave me an update. The fallout had been worse than I could have imagined. Leo's family, mortified by the scandal and the revelation of Lily's true financial background, had pressured him into an annulment, claiming the marriage was based on fraudulent pretenses. Lily was devastated. Mark, after a few blustering attempts to fix things, had retreated back into his own selfish world, offering no support. Lily was alone, for the first time in her life. She was living in a small, rented apartment, struggling to find a job, with no skills beyond spending money she hadn't earned. Maya wrote, "She doesn't know how to do anything, Aunt Eleanor. You did everything for her. We all thought she was a princess, but we never realized you were the one maintaining the entire kingdom." Maya's words were profound vindication. It wasn't just my perception, the reality of the situation was clear to anyone who chose to look. She asked if she could see me, to apologize in person, and to build a real relationship. I agreed. She became the first member of my biological family to be welcomed back into my life, on my new terms of mutual respect and honesty. The ultimate vindication, however, came nearly a year after the wedding. It was a rainy Tuesday evening. The doorbell to my condo rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped. It was Lily. She looked diminished. Her clothes were ordinary, her hair lacked its usual perfect sheen. The entitled princess was gone, replaced by a young woman who looked lost and tired. I almost didn't open the door. But something made me turn the lock. I didn't invite her in. I simply stood in the doorway. "Hello, Lily," I said. My voice was even, devoid of the old pain. "Mom," she said, and her eyes filled with tears. "I am so sorry. I was a monster. What I said to you, it was unforgivable. I was spoiled and cruel, and I threw away the only person who ever truly loved me." The apology sounded genuine, raw with the pain of harsh experience. A younger version of me would have melted, would have thrown my arms around her and promised to make it all better. But I was not that woman anymore. "I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. I'm sorry for everything." She looked down at her hands. "I'm in trouble. I can't pay my rent. I don't know what to do. I have no one else to turn to," and there it was. The apology, however sincere, was still a preface to a request. The transaction was still the basis of our interaction. I looked at my daughter, this stranger on my doorstep, and I felt not anger, but a profound sense of pity. I had given her everything except the one thing she truly needed, the ability to stand on her own. My final act of love would be to finally give her that gift. "I accept your apology, Lily," I said, and I meant it. "But the bank of Mom is closed. The money you think I have, the endless well you drew from your entire life, it's not there for you anymore. It's building my business. It's funding my retirement. It's paying for my peace." Her face fell. The flicker of hope in her eyes died. "I love you," I continued, "and this was the hardest truth of all. And because I love you, I cannot help you. Your life is your own now. The greatest gift I can give you is the space to learn how to live it. I truly hope you find your way." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lecture her. I simply stated the new reality. Then, with a quiet finality, I closed the door, shutting out the past forever. As I stood in the hallway of my beautiful, peaceful home, I didn't feel cruel. I felt free. I had finally paid off the last debt of my old life. The beggar had become a queen in her own, self-made kingdom. What do you think? Was my decision too harsh, or was it the only way to break a cycle that had lasted a lifetime? Sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do is to let their child finally face the consequences of their own actions. Share your thoughts below.